we were able to reach three key points that the sisters will be sharing with us today regarding their vision of how to implement and ensure there is no gender-based discrimination, and also how algorithms work, and to create opportunities in order to have appropriate benefits in order to have a decent living, respecting women's rights, and also people from the LGBTQ community, plus community. So today we have sisters, brother, welcome, who will be sharing the work that has been carried out during the last 3 days. As I mentioned, it was very detailed work with a strong impact. Our vision is to create spaces so this information can have an impact on an international policy regarding this work, the future of labor, because this has an impact on all of us, not only the workers themselves working on digital platforms, but also us who use this kind of applications that are so convenient, aren't they? So this is the first step and the result of 6 months of work, of joint work to reach this forum. We started in April, which was a first initial public conversation after in-depth research regarding applications in Mexico during 10 years of this work here in Mexico. And based on this, ideas emerged from different sisters who came from other countries regarding how to extend this discussion to the whole of Latin America. It was a very inspiring vision, and this grew into an international vision, a global vision. So we have representatives from Uruguay, from Colombia, Argentina, Brazil. We also have the sister who comes from Nigeria, who is implementing this kind of work in her country in Nigeria. And through these last 3 days, we have developed a very expensive idea about the impact of this collective work. Thanks deeply to UNTA for all the work they've carried out to carry out this event, and the event that we had in April as well. And also last night, I had the pleasure to be with them in the opening of their Orange Point here in Mexico City, a place in which app workers can go to receive support, and also a space for them to feel comfortable throughout their working day. It's very inspiring, and I want to acknowledge the vision and the work of Saida, who has carried out this labor, this task in her work at UNTA, and she also is a participant in the training program of the new organizers of the Solidarity Centers. We recognize, acknowledge her work, her efforts to ensure that we have a space to raise our voices and make the changes that we need in order to have a better living. Thank you very much, and welcome, you all. Good morning, sisters, brothers. My name is Cruzcaya Hidalgo. I'm part of the Solidarity Center in Mexico, and it is my honor to accompany UNTA Union, the Union of Digital Platforms, in their organizational and political work. And it's also an honor for me to be able to accompany so many platform workers from many different countries throughout these years, and that these alliances crystallize today. The work in digital platforms, as you know, generates, it atomizes labor, it individualizes labor. It's a model that cuts the human networks. It breaks apart the networks between the workers. There's not a physical space. There's not a place in which they can meet. There are not clear mechanisms of assessments or a human resources office. There isn't even a space in which meet other workers on a daily basis. In this sense, within this precarious and adverse context, the platform workers, for them to find organizational forms, allows us to see that the platform workers are promoting a new form of unionism, a creative and generous unionism that perseveres and also includes technological renewal. I would like a round of applause for all the workers who are here today. Well, having said this, I want to tell you that this forum is the culminating point of a 4-day process of an international encounter between sisters working on digital platforms of different Latin American countries and also European countries. This encounter, this gathering, has enabled us to create networks and political alliances that we hope will lead us to future negotiations with bodies like the ILO. But apart from that, I want to highlight, in order before the sisters talk, that it is not insignificant that such a masculinized sector, like the delivery sector, and a masculinized sector in Latin America, where less than 10% are women in each of our countries, that there be sisters who are organizing and who are leaders within their unions. Here we have been able to share with general secretaries who are women and presidents who are women of the unions in Chile, all the way to Mexico, from Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Spain. And for us, it's an honor to greet the sisters from Brazil who had to leave today, this morning, and also all the sisters from Mexico, from different states of the Mexican Republic who participated at this gathering. Having said this, I want to introduce the sisters who are with us today. First of all, we have Angélica Salgado, who is a delivery worker of apps since 2017. Currently, she is a national consultant of the Unitary Central of Workers in Chile, CUT. She belongs to the National Executive Subsecretary of Organization and the National Secretary of the New Forms of Labor, Vice President of the Confederation of Trade Unions, and current President of the Corner Shop Union in Chile, the only inter-house union in the world. As follows, I want to introduce our sister Shaira Carduño Tovar from Mexico. She's a lesbian feminist woman and a proud representative of the delivery workers, women delivery workers. She comes from Toluca City in Mexico. She's part of the network of unionists, women unionists. She's a delivery worker in Mexico for the last 2 years, and she tells us this struggle and all the struggles are not possible without women that can provide their voice and their voice. The legacy of a unionist woman is reproduced in millions of other sister workers. Welcome, be Shaida. As follows, we will have Paz Arancibia. Paz is a specialist, a senior specialist in gender and non-discrimination in Latin American and Caribbean from ILO. She has been consultant of labor ministries in Spain from 2018 to 2020, and she has more than 20 years of experience in giving advice work in public policies and also to the UN. Welcome, Paz Arancibia. I also want to say that Paz has traveled from Lima, Peru to be with us today. Thank you very much, Paz. And we have Omar Laborde, Subdirector of the General Direction of Social Services of the Department of Labor in Mexico. He's a specialist in law in the UNAM. He has experience in the private field. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Omar. And today we will have this panel, and the methodology we'll be following will start with Angélica and Zaira making a presentations of the points they have negotiated and agreed with all the sisters of these unions that gathered in these last 4 days. After that, we will hear Paz and Omar. I want to remind you that we will be supporting you with the control of time. Elizabeth will be letting us know when our time is up. And I also want to mention that we're transmitting alive through the social network of Union Democracy. There's interpretation into English via Zoom. So we expect to set this forum internationally because of the importance it has and the symbolism that is representing us today. Thank you very much. Angelica, please. Good morning, everybody. For me, and as part of the time that we'll be using, it's an honor to share with each one of the women leaders who are here present here. And I've discovered that I'm not on my own. I say that everywhere. I'm not the only crazy one who's trying to defend the app workers. Having said this, I have said women workers because we are women workers, because the algorithm that rules us as the employer that changes our way of working without any prior notice. They're so focused on their profits, they forget that those that are behind the work and their functioning are actually human beings. Therefore, it leads us to precarity, insecurity, discrimination, a lack of labor health in each one of us who are women, migrants, young people, and dissidents. Our employer does not comply with the decent labor standards, nor the main ILO conventions, especially freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining. Also, regarding discrimination and in occupation and employment and labor. I want to repeat, we are women workers and our demand is to be recognized as such. Since when this doesn't take place, we face harder challenges in regard to us and the dissonances in our everyday environment and our labor. The last 4 days have been very intense work. We have reached a resolution that comprises 5 points regarding what we want ILO to hear from us. The first one has to do with discrimination. I will read it because we need it to be understood as it should be understood. 1. Compliance of ILO conventions 100 and 111 regarding discrimination in occupation and employment. Convention 97 and 143 regarding migrant workers, and Convention 3 on motherhood protection. This leads us to very clear examples. We are discriminated because we work in care work. The algorithm blocks us. We're discriminated when we're pregnant, when we become pregnant. The algorithm blocks us because we're pregnant, and we're discriminated once again when we have to raise our children after childbirth. 2. A specific regulation that ensures algorithmic transparency as well as human supervision of the use of algorithm to forbid the use of personal data like nationality and gender to avoid discrimination for gender reasons. Nobody knows what are the parameters of this of our employer, of our boss. And therefore, we cannot get to know how these profiles are developed, what we are, how we define ourselves. We have another very clear evaluation, which is the way the algorithm evaluates us. Therefore, since we don't have this transparency, we are limited in how to correct and improve or how to become better workers. Regarding violences, I think this doesn't need an example. a regulation that generates obligations by the companies, like having a protocol against harassment, and to sensitize people regarding gender violence. Women in the streets, we are harassed, we suffer vulnerabilities, we are violence exercised against us by the passengers, by the clients, and also by our working colleagues. So we need companies to have a protocol and regulate the situation. We don't have access to qualifying or blocking a client, and we're ongoing victims of this kind of violence. 4, a regulation that generates obligations by companies to establish different spaces that are mean for the digital workers. Streets are not thought in terms of work, but it's much more cruel with women. Women have to have safe spaces, clean spaces, because as opposed to men, we menstruate and we have periods in which we have to have access to it's incredible that in this 21st century, we need to ask for access to a bathroom, social security, health, to comply with the conventions regarding labor accidents. Conventions, we get sick. The burden that we have on our back are out of proportion. The fact that we don't have access to a bathroom produces cystitis, tension. There are problems with our knees, those of us that are on motorbikes. 155 ILO Convention for the sector of digital platforms for the gender approach. We deserve to have access to health as any worker in the world, and the right to pensions, to security. So, to safety. Today, Today, we're presenting enough elements for ILO to consider create an international convention on platform workers, on digital platforms, And this must have a gender perspective. It's a historical debt with women and dissidences, and it's a debt that has to be paid as of now. I will leave you with Saida. Good morning, everybody. What does a woman who's who works in delivery? I think all these questions can be asked looking at the working day of a woman working in digital platform. So we go into private life, from private life into public life. We don't have a physical place to work. This is very difficult for us to take places that we have never been allocated by patriarchy and machoism. I'm going to quote some experiences of sisters that bothered me. Sisters that drive, and they say that men, when they take their units and are traveling, masturbate in front of them. They don't know what to do. They're vulnerable to this situation. They ask the platform just says, we're following your trip. Thank you. Sisters that when they have accidents in the street and the police arrives, who should be protecting us, the police ask sexual favors so they don't take their motorcycles to the police station or to find them. Delivery workers who can't take more than 10 kilos are suspended either partially or forever. Delivery workers who suffer violence in the streets, in the restaurants, and in the houses that we deliver to as well. And you know why this happens? Because we're women. Only because we're women. Because we were born as women, we were born at a disadvantage. And because the state doesn't protect us. The state doesn't protect us. We have to go out and protect our own selves because the state hasn't ensured anything to us as workers. But today, the women delivery workers and drivers were fed up asking. We demand. But in a very strong voice. We demand from the state and public bodies to legislate digital platforms that have to have a real gender perspective. And although this might sound as a discourse of feminist women or crazy women, today women, we are breaking the barriers and we're demanding these positions of power. But today we do have power. We will promote this law. You have the power of promoting this reform. I think it's time to go into action. I will read some requests to ILO. Technical support to give support to programs from a gender perspective, addressed to training, accompanying, and strengthening union organizations. These can be implemented or supplemented with ILO and international and national organizations to accompany the mobilization of resources, to have projects that promote decent work, to bridge the gaps, to have more opportunities to improve the sector of digital platforms with a real gender perspective, as well as with campaigns against gender violence in the apps, to carry out a regional study regarding the working conditions in digital platforms with a gender approach that can define a common ground for the situation of women in Latin America and the Caribbean. This includes a chapter about closing the gap between Convention 190 and the regions in a space for digital platforms. This is a public study that guides the new convention for the public policies with a gender perspective, technical assistance to develop national legislations regarding digital platforms. We are workers, and we demand that these ILO conventions that have been ratified in Mexico and the rest of the countries, that they actually be complied with, and we demand that the Mexican government, through the Labor Department, generate spaces of conversations and actions that are inclusive and introduce the regulation of the work in digital platform. The National Union of Platform Workers, as a union, we're willing to become part of these spaces for dialoguing and co-creating. We expect an openness towards these spaces to raise our voice, and that this voice leads us to ensure the rights of the workers in digital platforms. Sisters, I'm going to ask you to help me to say 3 times, we have the power. 1, 2, 3. We have the power. We have the power. We have the power. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to appreciate international solidarity because I've been given a double gift. The first one was to bring me to Mexico City, which is my favorite city, or one of my favorite cities in the world. It would be my favorite city if Madrid didn't exist, which is where I come from. But since Madrid exists, this is my second favorite city. And the second gift is to be able to hear and do what I like most, which is to listen to the vindications of the labor rights of women who are organized, in this case, who are organizing in the platforms. So it's a great gift. Thank you very much to the colleagues of International Solidarity. I hope this doesn't count in my time, please. I wanted to also appreciate Angelica and Shaila for bringing the testimonies. Without testimonies, we cannot construct policies. So I take these testimonies with me in my heart and in my mind. I wanted also to split my presentation into 2 parts. I had put it this way. First is to talk about how to have a picture of what the platform workers are like according to ILO, and the second part in which I explain what is the pathway that takes ILO to establish a norm. You know, ILO is a tripartite organization, and it still hasn't established a norm regarding digital platforms, but we're on the pathway to have it established. The digital platforms set forth an enormous number of opportunities to have labor flexibility, conciliation, to be able to include vulnerable workers, to be able to make a better use of resources, but it also has numerous risks and dangers, greater informality, unloyal competition, coding. We've talked about algorithms as a technified work that we use, which is co-modifying labor because it's ruled by an algorithm, and it has a lot of deficits in terms of decent labor, in terms of wages, in terms of terminating work or deactivating work, as it's called, and the works in which you work, how you can solve the labor conflicts, and how you can sit at a table where there's conflict resolution and dialoguing, and also regarding the data, the privacy of data, the lack of transparency of the platforms and the algorithms. What we can see in ILO, the studies that we have carried out, and the studies are not extensive yet, is that throughout the world, there are two estimates. There's a first estimate that says there's 145 million workers, platform workers. Another one that says that there's 435 millions, out of which 132 millions are platform workers as their main job, 173 that are as a secondary job that is accompanied by another job, and 106 that are marginals. The regions in which there's more platform work is in North America, Canada, the USA, Mexico, in Europe. There's 22%, in Asia and the Pacific, there's 15%, and in Latin America, it's between 3 and 4% of the platform workers, especially in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Panama as well. Why is this work important? Because in 10 years, the platform workers have multiplied by 5. If we project this, we can see it's work that is growing more and more. ILO differentiates between two different works of platform work. The platform work on web, online, which is those that connect regardless of where they are in the world, and they carry out a specific task, i.e., architectonic design, a translation, graphic work, bots or whatever. And I only have 3 minutes left, but I had 15, didn't I? Good grief. So I haven't reached the section on the gaps. And the workers that carry out activities like the one that Shaila was saying, of locating, i.e. messenger delivery work, which take place in the same location, the same country. In the first area, there are 4 workers out of each 10 online workers. In the location platforms, there's only 1 woman out of each 10. There is an occupational segregation, i.e. we're reflecting what happens in the labor market, the same gaps, the same biases as we're experiencing in the platform work. We know that there are more women who carry out service, administrative work, or marketing work, and there are more men that carry out more work that have to do with coding and with technical topics regarding computation. We also know that in the face of those that say that platform work is good for women because there's more flexibility, there's the trap of flexibility, as Angelica was noting, because there's the unpaid care work, because we're also taking care of the work in our homes, doing care work in our homes, as well as the platform work. There's a wage gap between what women and men earn. And this exists specifically in online work or web work. The global hours worked are apparently are the same, but when we go to the countries, there are wage gaps between men and women that are very extensive. And as Shaila said, there is discrimination in the location platforms regarding violence and harassment, discrimination, gender discrimination, LGBT plus, and other forms of discrimination because of migration, ethnic origin, etc. And of all this, we know that there's a discriminatory bias that is very important in the commodification of work, the algorithm that was created in a way that is discriminatory. So if I have 4 minutes, I would like to explain to you how we move forward together, how we can move forward together on this pathway that will be reaching 2026, when with all optimism, we hope that an international standard is developed for platform workers. 2026. In March this year, the Administration Council has requested a study on the labor deficits in decent work and the platform economy. It's the study that has two different senses. What the expert committee has done is to analyze whether the existing conventions, Convention 100, 190, and 156, regarding workers with family responsibilities, which is very important, if these conventions are applicable to platform workers or not. And what you have seen is that they are applicable. And the second part of the research is whether there's gaps in these abysses in these forms of work. And if these gaps exist, how we can solve them or bridge them through a new convention. In November this year, a report will be presented. It's the white paper is called. And there's a survey to the member countries. And because some countries are more advanced in legislation, for example, in our region, Chile is more advanced. And there's a picture of what we have in our regions. And this takes us to January 2025, where we have the yellow report, where the member countries have made a compilation, and they go to the international conference in June and say, we're going to discuss this. That's all we have. This is a picture. This is the box that we have. In August 2025, we have the Brown report. The Brown report or Brown paper, there's a first draft that considers the norm or the standard existing that is applicable to the platform workers, and a new standard or norm. There are many people who work on platforms who say, well, I work in Mexico, but I'm working for India, then this is not applicable to me. Nonetheless, there's the convention that works with maritime workers located in different legislation. So that would be an opportunity to carry out a legislation for platform workers in different areas of the world. And then we go to the blue paper. That's February 2026. It's a lengthy process, I know. Tripartite structures are take a long time, but they're solid once they're approved. And then we go to the grand instrument with the draft of an international standard that will be discussed in the conference in 2026, in which we expect that this will provide a norm for decent labor for platform workers. What else are we doing in the region? Well, we're starting to know what we have in our toolbox and to have this image. In the regional office, we're launching a survey for 3,700 workers of the 11 platforms that are more highly representative in Latin America. We are starting to launch this survey. This survey has included questions with a gender perspective, and in the gender department, what we have done is that we're going to launch a report about decent labor for women in digital platforms. This report, we will do it jointly with UN Women and Zahid, and we're starting to create the reference terms so we could have input from you to be able to have a very specific survey geared to women who are working on location platforms and on digital platforms as well. I want you to know that discrimination in Convention 111 that has already been mentioned here in the digital platform, discrimination is highly sophisticated. The algorithms are highly sophisticated. It requires having a mental framework where it can move towards transformative policy in gender terms that will put an end to the unfair division, sexual division of labor. Because if we're conveying the same biases as normal work, we won't be able to move forward. We will always be occupying secondary work. We will be suffering the consequences of discrimination and violence in our work. So I want to encourage you to continue. Don't remain alone. Remain together, get organized, raise your voices. You have something to say as women on platforms, and inform us, please, and let our about the situation or each one of our countries in Mexico, Brazil, and Chile, because that's the way we'll be able to move forward together. Thank you very much. Hello, good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here at the Forum Raise Your Voice, organized by the Solidarity Center in Mexico. And on behalf of the Department of Labor in Mexico, specifically the Unit of Decent Labor and the Department of Social Welfare that I belong to, it's our pleasure to participate in this forum. For me, it's an honor to be here with you, since at the Labor Department we have been promoting decent labor work with perspective. In this sense, for us, it's important to note that the Labor Department seeks to regulate platform work in order to ensure the right to decent labor, formal labor, flexible labor for the workers in digital platforms, and with this also ensure the sustainability of the business model as you know it. It should be noted that since 2021, the Labor Department, specifically the units of decent labor and social welfare, has been carrying out a responsible analysis accompanied by the platform workers and the companies as such, in order to analyze the general working conditions and social security conditions, since we know we have detected that in Mexico there are around 500 people who are engaged in this kind of work, both in transportation and food delivery. The Department of Labor has been dialoguing in a tripartite way with unions and companies and collectives and the platform workers in order to have the right instruments for a public policy that we expect to present to the Congress and to modify the federal labor law. We know that at present, the working conditions of the platform workers are precarious in relation to labor protection. The social security benefits, they don't have minimum wages, they don't have a contract, a labor contract, they don't know the terms and conditions in which the platforms operate in many cases. There's a lack of an appropriate algorithmic policy. So we have the need to reform the federal labor law in order to eliminate these biases that we have had as of the entry of the platform in Mexico. So we're taking into account all the different aspects of the project for example, the minimum ground manifesto of UNTA and other documents that we have been compiling, so that we as labor authorities in Mexico can present to Congress a bill that takes up all these voices, all these ideas that we have been working on throughout this time. And we have carried out a very detailed and responsible work regarding this. We know that in our trench, we have to present this initiative and for Congress to do its work in this sense. So the interest of the Labor Department is to ensure the general conditions of labor and social security, such as the example that I have in mind as domestic work. As you know, we have been working responsibly in order to reform the labor law, the social security law. And today, the employers have the obligation to provide social security to their workers, and domestic workers. The clear example that with well-designed and responsible work, and with all the actors working shoulder to shoulder, the companies, the workers, the associations, and all of us that have this analysis, we can create a solid reform that can pay attention to the general working conditions of the workers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again to all of you for accompanying us today, especially to the members of the panel for this initial intervention. I want to remind all of you present here that there are pieces of paper where you can write your questions and you can send them to the front so we can read them out. In the meantime, there's a request to intervene by Angelica, and there's a first question as well. So I will ask the question and I will give the floor to the members of the panel. And you can give the questions to the Solidarity Center question. The first question for PAS is, how will ILO ensure the voices of the workers by 2026? And with this, I will give the floor to Angelica, and then we will each take the floor. Rather than a question, I'm saying it as a union leader of the largest confederation in Chile. I've been in a state of shock to hear the government representative saying that they have to defend a model that is oppressive, that it does reduce the unemployment level in the countries in a fantasy level, but it comes a way of, we don't want the levels of unemployment to come up because we have these apps that deliver work. They don't deliver labor, gentlemen. They make us slave because of the need, because we don't have public policies to protect this labor. The truth is that I wage the same struggle in my country, and we have a law that is terrible. And these apps, the Labor Department in Chile, and we have a left-wing government, and our left-wing government created a resolution that one way or another protects a worker, one way or another. And the companies for a year blocked this resolution. As opposed to Mexico, in Chile we have a Senate and a legislative branch that is against the current government. I understand that that's not the situation here. So if we don't work with political decisions, which is what we need, political determination to transform the lives of 500,000 workers, which is what we have from the reports. But I, as a worker, you can say that I'm sure there are many more. I can tell you. And I apologize that I get engaged in this topic, which is a political issue, an internal issue here in this country. If we're going to, the companies are united. So In 3 weeks, we have to to maintain the system. We're all moving towards that, not only the app workers. Artificial intelligence is going to take away jobs or transform work in such a way that we will just be an entity that clicks on an enter to issue a question and have a solution generated. This is the only moment we have to join, to get together. And sorry that I'm extending myself. This union of 8 different countries that we have seen today should not be only 8 countries. It's difficult for us to unionize because we are not workers recognized by the governments, because apps do not recognize their labor relationship with us. We do not have right to unionization. And what we're seeing here is workers who lead unions constructed on the fantasy of having a union. I say, this was a suspicion I had, and it's very sad. We have been reduced as workers, and we're fighting against 2 monsters, politicians and the app companies. Thank you, Angelica. For this initial round of questions and answers, we will have 3 minutes for Paz and 3 minutes for Omar as well. And I want to remind you that you can give the Solidarity Centers team your questions in writing so we can generate a new round. Thank you very much for the question. It's very important. I think that we have to understand what ILO is clearly. ILO is a tripartite organization, and it's tripartite members of each country. What does this mean? This means that we can work in 2 different ways, so voices can be delivered. A first way is in the secretariat of ILO. We're going to look at the picture together, because if we don't have data, we cannot legislate. We're going to have the reports, we're going to see the picture. What is the situation of women platform workers in Latin America and Caribbean? We're going to see what comes out of this. And in the second place, we have to work at the level of each country. I think Angelica is the best example, and I tend to think that she's right. She's representing CUT as well. We have to integrate into unions. We have to try to talk with the unions, with the unionized workers that belong to ILO, so that their claims can come from your countries to the representatives that will be at the International Labor Conference in 2025 and 2026. So that is work that you have to carry out in your own countries. You have to get organized, you have to raise your voices, you have to knock on the doors of other unions so that this voice can reach the International Labor Conference. Thank you very much. Well, in this sense, regarding the position of the Mexican government, specifically of the Labor Department regarding the business model as such, as labor authorities in Mexico, we try to listen to all the voices in the sector. We listen to the platform companies, we listen to the workers, we listen to the associations, we listen to the unions. And in this sense, we are having to add all the efforts by the work carried out by the union, the UNTA, to design a project that can contain all the necessary elements to be able to have this business model in a regulated way, not for it to have biases. We need to have an appropriate algorithmic policy that does not limit the rights of the workers, to have protocols with a gender perspective. So all these elements that we're carrying out and that are being taken into consideration through the dialogues that we have been having within the Labor Department and other public dialogues, all these things are added up so we can have a solid bill based on a responsible analysis. We've also had an analysis of the Chilean norms and the Spanish norms, these examples that provide us with a stronger visibility of what we want so the federal labor law can be modified in an appropriate way. Well, we have received several questions that are being dealt with the team. And there's a specific question for Omar of the Labor Department. I will read all the questions together, and then I will give you time to answer the questions altogether as well. The first question is, what is the route established by the Labor Department to present the bill for a reform? Which will be, or which are the government's actions to ensure that apps respect labor rights of the workers in Mexico? And the third question, which is the importance of seeking a dialogue between companies and workers that seems to be equitable and when they have actually been unfair? Omar, you have 3 minutes to answer these 3 questions. Thank you very much. The route that the Department of Economy, based on the need to regulate the platform work, since the modification to outsourcing in Mexico, we have been reforming step by step the labor law. A successful example that we have had is housework, domestic work, where we have modified the federal labor law and the Social Security law, where the general working conditions are now clear, visible, and concrete for this group of domestic workers. And the specific case of the route that we have been following is to continue with the dialogue where we can come closer to all the actors involved, the workers, the platform workers, platform companies, because we need to hear all the voices, all the positions, and to refine the points as the ones that are being highlighted with the requests that are being made to ILO. So we all have to have this very clear aspect to be able to modify the federal labor law. As such, the actions taken by the government would be to modify the law, on the one hand, as I have been saying, and also locally, there needs to be modifications to some regulations such as the traffic regulation to be able to implement the norm appropriately. That's part of the effort at a federal level to labor, at a federal level to modify the federal labor law and also the local regulations. For us, dialoguing is very important because dialoguing enables us to listen to all the voices and all the perspectives of each of the positions involved. So it's important to listen to everybody. We cannot limit and say, you know what, we're not going to pay attention to the company because they have their own interests. So we have to have an open perspective in order to be able to understand which is their position and to be able to filter all their requests and all that this work implies to reform the federal labor law. Thank you. Thank you very much, Omar. I'm going to read some questions for Paz from ILO, and then some questions for the workers, the sisters workers. I will read them one after the other, so you can write down the questions and then comment them. For Laura. Sorry, from Laura, the sister from Colombia. It's a question for ILO representative. What kind of technical support do we find in our countries, Colombia, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, and Spain, from ILO? how can we move forward in this study that you're setting forth, that you mentioned? And the second question, how to attribute employer responsibility to the digital companies with a future convention? Would the companies in all the different countries have responsibilities? Will they be held responsible? And now the questions to the workers. The first one, mention was made about 500,000 digital workers in Mexico. What is going to happen with all these people outside the digital platforms when they are recognized? This is one of the questions that are being formulated in all countries, the debate regarding regulation. The second question is a specific question for UNTA, for SAIRA. What actions or programs does the union have regarding sexual harassment? We'll start with Paz, 3 minutes, and Kerika, 3 minutes. And yes, thank you to Sister in Colombia. In each of your countries, there is an office, a national ILO office. In Mexico, there's one. In Spain, there's another one. In Colombia, there's another one. And that's where they're carrying out different programs at a national level. I represent the regional office. So come in contact with your national offices, and please do get in contact with your national union representatives. Do get in contact with your national union representatives. Now, as far as how this will be done, once there's a convention, the countries have to ratify it. For example, Convention 190 that Mexico has just ratified recently, and it becomes, there's a year in which they're obliged to comply. The conventions are discussed in a tripartite way. If there's a convention in June 2026, the employers have already been in the dialoguing table with the labor ministries and the unions. So there's a point of departure that there's an intention there. And then once the convention is ratified, so it can be compliant, it has to be ratified by the country. Once the convention has been ratified, the compliance is obligatory. Thank you very much. Regarding the 500,000 jobs that could be lost, I could ask the opposite question. I will talk about the figures in Chile. What happens in Chile? The 9 million workers who do have labor responsibility recognition, there are laws to exist to protect them. It's not that we're going to lose 500 workers. These jobs are regulated. They have healthcare. They have. So we're not saying correctly the way we're not looking at this work appropriately. We're not able to understand, the state hasn't understood that we are actually workers and that we have rights, like any workers inhabiting in each one of our countries. I don't believe in this, oh, we're going to be abandoned and we're going to go into poverty. That's a right-wing discourse, a neoliberal discourse, a capitalist discourse I don't share. And not because I'm more leftist, but because I've experienced it. I'm a member of union because I was hired, because the company that hired me gave me all the benefits. And by giving me all the benefits, it gave me the right to create a union with my brothers and sisters. It's a fantasy. It's a fake. See it as you want, as you like. The companies are always threatening to leave. Our collective bargaining, we were always been threatened that we would not join Corner Shop or Uber. The truth is that money prevails, and if the market is good, the company's going to stay. And if the market is bad, the company's going to leave the country, and another one will come, and we'll create within us our own countries. Corner Shop was a Chilean company, and it set up here in Mexico and Chile. In Chile, it had good social rules. In Mexico, there was an open door to do whatever they wanted to do. So let's get rid of this ghost of if they're going to leave, if they're going to leave, they're going to leave. These 500,000 were not workers. We're not going to be dismissed because we don't exist in reality so far. Well, yes. Applications are using our fear that if they're regulated, they will leave. They keep on blocking people. They keep on blocking accounts without doing anything. I prefer to die standing than to die like this, doing nothing. And regarding the question that I was asked, what are we doing in UNTA, especially me as the Secretary General, the first thing is what we did yesterday, to create the orange point. That's our first action. And as unfortunately the state is not protecting us, we make alliances with other unions, the miners, the domestic workers, the Solidarity Center. Why? Because we have to create these spaces and have legal and psychological accompaniment to the sisters that suffer harassment. That's what we do. But there's a very precise aspect that I always emphasize on, to not allow my union to be a simulated union that just uses women to give a voice to false claims. That, for me, is where harassment starts, because I'm not a puppet of anybody. Thank you very, very much, Sister Angelica and Sister Saida. We have two additional questions for Omar. One is from the press that says as follows: there has been an approachment to the platform companies for the reform of the labor law. What is your position about this? And the second, what dialogue commitments will the Mexican government take on with the unions and UNTA vis-a-vis the reform? Again, Omar, you have 3 minutes to answer these two questions. Well, what has been taking place is since 2021, we've been coming close to each other. We've received proposals. We have listened to your concerns, the concerns of the companies. You are well known in Mexico. And they have the same doubts and questions. What will happen when the reform is implemented? What will happen? What is the time frame to implement this reform? So we have been dialoguing with the companies and with everybody in order to be able to come close and to be able to solve all the concerns that exist, and to be able to have a reform that is more comprehensive. The commitment of the Mexican government, specifically the Labor Department, is that once the bill is presented to Congress, as the federal executive branch, we have no influence within the legislative process. However, we know very clearly that the commissions of the Senate and the House of Representatives are in charge of looking at all the bills that have been set forth since we've been working on this topic, to be able to add all the different points that are germane, and to have a resolution that is much more robust, and to be able to discuss it in both cases. So that's part of our commitment, to have a robust, solid reform, and to do the corresponding legislative work where we're expecting this to take place in this period and the period for the next year. Excuse me. Has a proposal been presented, or are you saying this? We're working on it right now. That was a question from the public. Thank you very much, Omar. And also, thank you for the questions from the press. I will continue with a question for Paz. And there's also a question, a general question that is for Omar as well. The question for Paz is the following. How can how can unions be supported? Unions that have wide experience in collective workers to organize the workers that want to have a new union. Perhaps highlight past if you can tell us what is the role that unions, that the confederations that are present in ILO, in the dialogues and ILOs, and how could small unions raise their voice and also reach these decision-making spaces? And for Omar, the question is the following. This is a question that comes from our sister Paola from Argentina, from the trade union in Argentina. The Labor Department in Social Security in Mexico, will it work to regulate the work in digital platforms, taking into account the ratified ILO platforms? Please. Very quickly. ILO, in ILO, the union confederations are represented. It's the ones that are represented at the Confederation of the Americas, and there are many other unions from the different countries that are also represented. It's like a pyramid that goes up and up until we reach the people who are the delegates in the negotiation tables with the governments, with the ministries, and the representative delegates at the International Labor Conference. I think that they have the capacity to hear your situation, your problems, and to understand how or which are the specific claims that you have, because they are also starting to represent this kind of digital workers. I would like to conclude without letting you know that especially for women union members, please contact the International Confederation of Domestic Workers, and I'll tell you why. Why? Because they've been very intense in having their own convention. They've walked along this path. A lot of your circumstances are similar: violence, harassment. You work in an isolated environment that doesn't allow you to affiliate into a union. You don't have a collective negotiation table. They have walked along this path. They're very strong women, and they've walked a long way. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because the wheel has already been invented. So add to this stream of women workers, FSA and other associations who've already walked this path. Thank you very much for the question from Paola in Argentina. And in this sense, I want to note that the Labor Department was present at the discussion forums in Geneva at ILO, where this topic was discussed, that Paz has been mentioning. And as she noted, this is a route that is being followed, and we expect that with this, the labor ministers were there as well. This will enable us to have a global perspective of what is taking place internationally with the conventions that we need to respect on the one hand, and on the other hand, to create a new international convention with a perspective regarding the digital platform workers. Sorry, I made a mistake and said domestic workers because it's in my mind because of all the work that we've been doing recently. But this is the sense of our position, to participate internationally and to be able to have this global vision and to be able to take it into account for the reform to the Mexican labor law, federal labor law. Thank you very much. I want to appreciate all of you who have sent questions. As you have seen, more than 40 questions have been collected. I want you to know that we have a highly participatory audience, and we also receive messages from the social networks. I will read some of these and then we'll go into the last round of questions. I concluded with a final message from the panel. The messages are in English, so please bear with me. A first message from a worker from Nigeria who had to be present at this last meeting, but she wasn't able to come. I appreciate this message because we want to take time as Solidarity Center to join us with the solidarity of the workers, because there's restricted visas. They cannot travel and exercise their right. There's Rosemary, and she belongs to the Outlaw Union in Nigeria. And she says that hearing the sisters, she fully identifies for the situation of women workers on platform workers in Nigeria, that it seems to her essential to generate dialogues with the governments in order to collect solutions for this sector. On the other hand, to Nigeria, Giovanni is her name, and she's the vice president of the APS Union, Transport Union in Nigeria. We want to send her greetings. And she sets forth that in Nigeria, companies have refused to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with the workers. And they have also refused to sit down at negotiation tables. They have refused to provide information regarding apps, regarding unjustified dismissals, and they have refused to ensure social security. And this actions of the companies in Nigeria, we know, takes place in Mexico and throughout our region. In relation to that, the sister says that the unity of the unions is the response, and makes a call to the Mexican government to support the labor rights of the digital workers, and especially the women digital workers. Thank you very much to the sisters that are connected in Nigeria. And with this, I move into the next questions. There's a question for ILO representative, which is, how do you work with efforts like ours, thinking in terms of the Solidarity Center, and how do you report about the voices of the workers, and how could we work together in the future? For the Labor Department, are you willing to get together in forums and working tables in collaboration with the workers? And the same question, and we as Solidarity Center, how could we support this process as well? And for the sisters of platform workers, you sisters, what message would you give to the platform workers who are not organized, who do not belong to these discussions, who do not form part of the discussions, and who are not aware of the political international topics? First pass, then Omar, and then Angelica and Saida. Very quickly, at ILO, we have tripartite tables. That implies that apart from the unions that are represented and the labor ministries and the employers, we invite on many occasions other associations and union organizations. At ILO, there is a link that works with me, a union link, and in each office, in each ILO office, we have an attaché, a union attaché. I'm in charge of gender, but there's a person who is specifically in charge of the unionized workers. Thank you very much. Regarding the question At the Labour Department, specifically the unit of decent work, the doors are open to receive the Solidarity Center, UNTA, and other workers' organizations of platform workers in order to continue outlining the work that is being carried out. And if there are some points that need to be modified or refined, we are completely willing to dialogue this and materialize this and be at ease that all the proposals that have been formulated and have been presented to us have been taken into account for the bill. So the doors are open at the Federal Department of Labor to be able to have a conversation, to have forums, to support the situation of the workers in platforms. The question has to do with how, let me see, how to formulate this. I've been engaged in this dance for 7 years, and I call it a dance because you have to abandon your family. It implies a lot of things. And they asked me, are you married? Nobody would put up with my commitment, my task. And I congratulate my kids because they're my support, actually. And in these 7 years, unionization is hardly difficult, you know. And as I said at the beginning, I felt I was the only crazy woman that would go out into the streets and ask the delivery workers whether they had a union. And I think once they put a I seemed as if I was crazy. I'd go to the traffic lights and ask, and people were afraid of me. They thought I was going to rob them. And I realized that it had to be another method because one learns as one goes along. And a thing I learned, and I tell this from my deepest feminine core, is to take care. Because when you take care of your environment, you clean your house, you take care of your kids, you cook, you take care of them, you produce care. And then you can start to think, how do I take care of my friend? How does my friend take care of her? How do we all take care of each other? Am I the only crazy woman who is there trying to bring women together? Not only women, actually, but to discover that we are women is what allows me to say what I'm going to say now. As a woman, we have all the power, and we've said it. We have the power to join another woman and ask her, how are you feeling? And if two get together and say, well, I'm not doing very well, and then a third woman comes and listens that we're not doing well, and that's the way organization starts. Women's organization starts from sharing. And one way or another, to share the experience that make us sisters, and to understand that her lower ab is hurting because she's menstruating, and that's why she's slower than usual, or to understand that the sister is carrying this huge bag and we help her lift it up. Or between two sisters, they share the load. And once the link is created, we start to think about how to structure. And we're like magnets, because 3 get together, and then 5 come, and then 6. And then men join us because they say, what's happening here with these women? And it happens to me. I appreciate it. It's something I've seen in my country. So I think that the essence of being a woman enables us to get organized. There are no constraints. There's just tests and trials, trial and error, but there are no limits, so no constraints. Thank you for your message. And adding to what Angelica said, and also in relation to the question that I was asked regarding the gender protocols, women, unfortunately or fortunately, because the state is not able, we have to create alliances and not to restrict ourselves to the state's protocols, because sometimes they're obsolete. We have to join other unions and other organizations. And what Angelica said, we have to listen carefully, because a woman will only be questioned when she files a complaint. Me personally, if a woman comes and tells me that she has been suffered violence, I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to doubt that it's true. And I will never allow her to face the perpetrator until the process is end. As a secretary of gender in my union, I want to convey the following message to the sisters who are unionized and those that are not unionized to join together. Women can achieve enormous things together. Right now, many supposed allies will be with us just to open gaps to gain power. And we have to be very careful about this. So I need to say that women together can create a revolution. We've done it and we can continue doing it. And sisters have a lot of strength from Mexico to whatever country you're in. And here you will have an ally in Mexico, in UNTA. Well, and the orange points that yesterday we inaugurated, the first orange point, for those of us that are involved in feminism, this emerged in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, because of the imminent violence against women. And it was promoted by the governor, women government 5 years ago. And it started to be promoted in restaurants, gas stations, and strategic points throughout the city. And it has been extended to other cities in Mexico and other countries. So platform workers that are women and any women can reach these points, ask for protection to the managers or the owners, and they're obliged to shelter you and call the police. And in our case, if we are unionized or belong to an organization that can protect us, to inform this organization so they can immediately come and provide us with protection. That's the way the orange points function regarding violence. But also, it's the issue of helping each other as workers. We can go to the bathroom, we can drink water, we can charge our mobiles, because the apps don't give us a physical place where we can work. And these places will function like this for the women platform workers and other women as well, not only those that work in platforms. Thank you very much to all the sisters and brothers that have been with us today, and they have also asked questions, both here and the social networks. So I want to invite you, I want to invite all of you who have been here, who've had questions that haven't been answered through this forum, to do your questions directly to the members of the panel after the forum. And you can also open social dialoguings and come in contact with us. The unions are open to continue with this dialogue. They have social networks. ILO has already told us, PAS has told us what are the ways of creating these dialogues. And the Labor Department has already told us that they're open to continue conversing and creating joint proposals with the workers. So there's an open invitation to expand these dialogues. On my behalf, I want to appreciate all the workers that were part of this international encounter. And I want to mention that the unions that came and what countries they came from. And it's an honor for the Solidarity Center in Mexico to see the trust of the workers, that the platform workers, the digital platform workers have had in us to be able to generate these alliances. And thank you very much to all of you for having given yourself this time and travel from your countries and to be together and thinking about the advocacy, international advocacy, and the different alliances, feminism and gender perspective. Is a proposal to stop we're betting on stopping capital and to construct another logic, other logics. So this is very important. So a round of applause to all the sisters who are here. And to mention that we had sisters from CUT Chile, Union of Workers, Delivery Workers, and UTP in Peru and Paraguay, Unity in Colombia, Colombian Association of App Drivers, Riders for Rights in Spain, CUT Brazil, Union of Transport Workers in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, UNTA in Mexico, and the Union of Trade Employees in Argentina. Thank you deeply, sisters, for having come, for generating global proposals that are germane for ILO dialogues and our own regional dialogues and national dialogues. The Solidarity Center says again and again that Latin America is a pioneer region in the organization of platform workers. It was the digital platforms in this region that promoted international stoppages in 2020 during the pandemic, 4 international stoppages that had an alliance of more than 60 organizations worldwide and was led by platform worker organizations in Latin America. And it is women in Latin America who have been able to construct unions, the first unions in different countries, like Unity Colombia, created by women, like PENAP in Ecuador, created by women, like in Argentina and Uruguay, unions in Brazil as well, created by women. I think this is historical, and we deeply appreciate your participation. And with that, we will give the floor to Beatriz again for the closure of this forum. Well, on behalf of the Solidarity Center globally, our office here in Mexico, this is the kind of work, the kind of vision towards the future, which is our collective and collaborative work. We are not the ones who are heading ILO or the Department of Labor, but we open up spaces for workers to have a voice and to raise their voice, share their concerns, share their questions and their vision for their own lives, and to claim their dignity as citizens in their countries and in the world, and to use that voice and that vision in order to change the situation globally. That is the work that we carry out, and we do it not on our own. We do it in collaboration with the governments, international institutions, international entities, to actually create a world that can reflect the needs and the vision of the people as a whole. Thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you deeply, sisters that traveled from so far away, who worked lengthy days throughout the last 4 days, that shared from the depths of their hearts, that shared their vision for a better world, and that work for this, to make this a reality every day. Thank you very much, everybody here, and we will keep on moving forward. Thank you very much. And a final announcement. We promise it is a final announcement. The Solidarity Center, we believe that we can assess our own events in order to generate internal learning for us, but it's also an exercise of self-criticism, and it allows us to be able to articulate better events in the future. So we have colleagues from the Solidarity Center, Ana Maria and Gabriel, and they will apply a survey. So I would ask you, please, to give yourself the time to fill in this survey. This allows us to generate forums that comply with the expectations, needs, and the political dialogue. Thank you very much.